Good. It's so nice to talk with you. I was just sharing because I'm not sure everybody knows that in addition to being an author and illustrator, you do so much for Multicultural Children's Book Day behind the scenes that people might not even be aware of. So thank you for that.
I feel like that's like such a gift to be able to contribute to an organization like Multicultural Children's Book Day. It does so much, not just for all of the children who get these incredible books for free, but for the authors and the illustrators and the parents and the educators who have access to a bunch of books that they may not have been able to have access to 10 or 15 years ago. So right. It's a really incredible organization. And for those of you listening, definitely check out the website.
Yes. Well, thank you. Well, we appreciate everything that you do. And we also want to shine a spotlight on your writing and illustrating today. So why don't we, for those who might not be familiar with your books, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. My name is Sivan Hong, and I write a children's book series called the Super Fun Day Books. And it is a series that highlights, neurodivergent characters and really focuses on younger kids, so preschool to about 8 years old, and it helps them work through some of their challenges in a way that is inviting for them and for all of their peers.
Yeah, you know, what's really interesting is I feel like there are more books on the market today that have neurodiverse characters, but it seems like a lot of them are aimed towards neurotypical children. And they're great too. They help, helping them understand their neurodiverse peers, how they can better communicate and how they can be more inclusive of other children. But what I love about yours is that makes them unique is that they are really, they're for all children, but they especially have the neurodiverse children in mind, that it's really for them, in terms of representation and some of the practical aspects of it. Can you tell us more about what makes your story so unique? I think she froze just a minute. Hopefully we'll have her back. Okay, there you are. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Okay. I missed the question. I have a sense of where you were going in terms of,
hold on, we lost your audio for a second. Can you start over? We lost your audio for just a second there.
Yes, I'm not sure what's happening in the universe of the internet in my house today, apparently. So I didn't hear the full question, Leanna, but my sense is that why are these books written for neurodivergent children versus lots of books out there, and there didn't used to be, but now there are a lot more incredible books out there that talk about these things for neurotypical kids. So my books are structured like a social story, and a social story is a tool used in special education that walks a child through the steps of something that they are worried about. And it talks about their feelings, and then it gives them specific tools to help address that particular situation. And parents and educators use social stories to really help a child do something they may be super scared to do.
Yes. This is the one from the back to school book, and here she's getting ready for school and all this stuff.
Getting ready for school.
I walked into my classroom.
Exactly. And the first one I ever wrote for my kids was about going to the dentist, because being a neurodivergent child, frankly, being anybody, adult or child, going to the dentist can be nerve-wracking. But for the very first time, not knowing what to expect, and it has weird smells and really bright lights and horrible noises. And so what do you do to make a child more comfortable in that scenario? And what are the certain things that you can give to a neurodivergent child, somebody who has sensory issues, to make that experience easier for them? And so in the case of my children, they got to wear sunglasses to help with the bright lights, and earphones to be able to mull out some of the noises, and they got to see the room in advance, right? They got a trip to the dentist without going to the dentist to really understand the space. And so those are the kinds of suggestions that social stories have. And my books are based on true stories that happened to my children and are structured give real world examples. They give real world examples to be able to help that child face that challenge on their own and see that they can do it and then end up in a good spot. And while they are targeted for neurodivergent kids, lots of kids have these fears. And so they're great conversation starters for all kinds of kids. They are just specifically designed for neurodivergent kids.
Right. And sorry, I had trouble with my video for a minute. I'm not sure if you mentioned that. I know yours had, like, you use a font that is special for kids that have might have dyslexia, and the illustrations, you were really careful to make them so they weren't distracting, right? Could you say more about that? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. So I illustrated them in a way that was very purposefully simple. If you take a picture book that has some of the most beautiful illustrations and you put it in front of a child with ADHD, they may get distracted and look at the illustrations and be like, wow, this child's room has a red book on the shelf. I wonder what that book is. Why would they have that book on the shelf? And lose focus on the story. And so my illustrations are really designed to keep a focus on the story and make that story accessible for all kinds of learners, which is why I use dyslexic friendly font and why all of my books are also available as audiobooks for oral listeners as well. They really are, really try to make them accessible to as many kids as possible.
And what difference do you think that makes to the kids too that are reading it? I mean, the neurodiverse kids seeing kids that are like them in books.
I think it normalizes their differences, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we at Multicultural Children's Book Day talk about this idea of books being mirrors for a child. And when you see yourself in a book, you recognize the fact that what you are experiencing and your feelings are not so different than what other people experience and feel. And I've gotten lots of one of my books where the child is wearing headphones and the child will say, oh my gosh, that's just like me. And then it's not so weird anymore. It's not so different. It's like, oh, it's just another part of who you are as a person, and it normalizes it. And to me, that is one of the most powerful aspects of writing children's books like this.
Yeah, and I think also for the neurotypical kids, seeing this, that they being able to relate in a different way to a child that's neurodiverse is also really special. Like, oh yeah, I don't really like going to the dentist either. And those are things, you know, that they can kind of feel like not so different anymore. You already touched on this some, but maybe if you could talk a little bit more about, so how can parents and educators, if they have a child that they're wanting to help with a situation that's really worrying for them, how can they use your books for that? I mean, you've kind of talked about how social stories, so is this something, for example, with back to school, like they could be reading this book ahead of time and kind of walking through with the kids? How can teachers be using it in their classroom?
So that's a great question. I actually have on my website, sivanhong.com, free teacher's guides for every single one of my books. And they were developed by a school psychologist and an elementary school teacher, and they were classroom tested with the kids. And so it has a whole bunch of ideas on how to leverage the content in these books. But for parents before school, if you read my back to school book, which is called Emily D. and the Fearful First Day, it highlights a bunch of the worries that a child will have about the first day of school. You know, what if none of the kids remember me, or, you know, or a gamut of different worries. And it opens that conversation to start saying, well, is that what you're feeling? Or I wonder why she feels this way. Because a child may be feeling all of these things, but may not have a vehicle to easily communicate them unless you have something that helps spark that conversation. And that's what this book does. But in addition, it gives tips to parents, right? The child in this book goes to the classroom before all of the peers do on the first day of school and gets to meet with their teacher before everyone else and gets to walk around the classroom and see what everything is before everyone gets there. And a child with sensory issues or school anxiety issues, that kind of setup makes getting used to those new things a lot easier, and then they can deal with all of the kids coming in and all of the kind of craziness that the first day of school brings. But it's a way of really reducing that stress level, and so the book is filled with tips like that for parents.
That's wonderful. I mean, what a great resource for people who want to, I mean, for the children themselves, but like you said, for the parents and educators to be able to have those conversations with them. And I think one of the reasons you have such great insight on providing these resources is that you've been very open about the fact that you're neurodiverse yourself. How do you think that influences how you create the books in terms of, you know, it definitely gives you special insight, but also does that affect how you're, I think we lost her there for a minute. How does that affect the insights you might have in doing the books, but also did getting the diagnosis, did that help you figure out did it kind of help you in your process of writing in a way, like knowing, okay, well, these are things I might need to do to make it easier for myself, or what was that like?
So I got my diagnosis like so many other women after my kids had been diagnosed, because when I grew up, they didn't really look at girls very often and say, oh, this is what's going on with you. They were just like, oh, she's a troublemaker or something like that, right? Like they didn't diagnose girls. And today they still have a much lower level of getting diagnosed than their male counterparts. And so I didn't,
just to say, that's why I love that you have boys on your cover too, but also that you have one that features a girl, which I think is really cool.
Right, I have two. My most recent one also has a girl on the cover, and both of the girls are girls of color, because talk about an underserved population. The media always shows a white male.
Right.
It's the white male that we know, right? It's Rain Man. It's the guy on this TV show, that show. It's always a white male, and these girls need to be able to see themselves in these books too, that it's not just this one kind of character. So I was very deliberate about making sure that my characters are diverse, because the experiences are the same for these kids, regardless of whether they're female or male or white or black or whatever color they happen to be. But my experience after getting diagnosed, I was able to, I have a patience and an understanding with my children about their experiences in a way that before the diagnosis, I felt like I understood, but somehow getting that formal label on it, which kind of I always knew I had, but I never had the formal label, really helped codify for me. And when I write my books, I sit down with my kids and I really make sure that the experiences that I highlight in the books are the experiences and the feelings that they feel and that they felt, so that there's a true kind of authenticity of the experience, right? Like they go through and they're like, yep, that's exactly right. Or no, mom, that's not what it was like. And here's how it was different. And they kind of co-write the books with me in a way, right? They pick the names of the characters, and all of the teachers in my books are their teachers, right? They're like, make sure you put, Miss Reddy in this book, or make sure you put Miss Rosenthal in this book, because these teachers have meant so much to them. So the books have that authenticity because they're real. And then I can layer in my own voice as somebody who's neurodivergent, and it allows me to talk to this community in a way that's different than if I was just a mother. And I don't want to say just a mother, because being a mother of a neurodivergent child is can be challenging, and it has incredible benefits and joys to it, but it's not always the easiest thing. But being able to say, this was my experience, this is what I feel, has really helped. So I can't read books like on paper, like never. As a child, in my whole education, it was such a hard struggle for me. And that's why I felt like it was really important for me to have them as audiobooks, because my experience is that that's how I consume literature, right? And so I was able to say, this is what I know, this is my personal struggle, how do I make it better for other people? And since then, you know, one of my sons, that's how he consumes books as well, like, and is a voracious reader, without actually using his eyes to consume the words. He uses his ears, just like, and I explained to him, you know, somebody who is blind reads with their hands. It doesn't mean they're not reading if you don't read with your eyes. It's just a different way of getting those words into your brain.
Oh, I love thinking about it that way, because I do feel like a lot of people think, oh, it's not really reading if you're not getting the words off the page, if you're not using your eyes, like you said. That's a great example. I love audiobooks too, but like you say, for so many kids, it's so easier, you know, to consume the books, listening to them, and even listening to them and maybe following along in the book might work for some kids. But I love that you made such an effort to do the audiobooks too, and based on your experiences. And we're coming up on time. I want to make sure you have time. We have touched on the back to school book, which of course is so relevant now, since a lot of kids are going back to school soon. But hopefully oh, there you are. I just want to make sure you have time to talk about your latest book, because we talked about the back to school one. I wanted to make sure people knew about that. But do you want to share with your other one that came out, I think, in the spring?
It did. And this was one that was kind of, because as being, I only felt like the end of school was supposed to be fun. It was like spring and summer fun and all the rest of that stuff. But because the end of school is so filled with change, change is hard. And so I wrote this book about how to deal with the end of school to make it seamless, and as less stressful for those kids as possible. Did you catch that, Anna? I'm not sure, because you keep freezing on my screen.
I lost the video, but I lost the video, but we could hear the audio. I mean, I love that the book is about the end of school and how that can be hard too, because I think a lot of us are more aware of back to school being hard, but we don't think about the end of school, because like you say, the end of school is supposed to be something really fun. And we don't think about the fact that for a lot of kids, especially neurodivergent kids, any kind of transition, major transition, can be difficult, even if it's something we think of as fun. So I was just saying, I love that you did this, because most of us think more of back to school as being hard. We don't think that much of the end of school as being hard. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out, go to her website. You can see all of the books on there, including the last one. Or if you want to pick up the back to school book, we're coming up on Halloween, not that much longer. We have to think about that. She has a great one about Halloween and one, The Miserable Monday. So, and also, like she says, she has free teacher guides on there that were all developed by school psychologists and teachers. So be sure to check those out.